Representative Ted Yoho referred to his congressional colleague, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as a fucking bitch. Today, we're talking about the unfair bias in treatment of women in leadership. My name is Jennifer Mitchell Earley. I help individuals and teams achieve organizational success, and this is Leadership Matters. Why do women face unfair barriers in leadership? Women are just as confident, as determined, astute, well-versed, and experts in their field as men, and yet they still face unfair barriers in leadership. Why is it that when a woman is assertive or competitive or strong, that those are all viewed as negative traits, but when you look at her male counterpart, those are all things that have been applauded and have been cultivated in a male culture from being a little boy all the way up? Gender incongruence. Stereotypical traits that are normally aligned with men are used or associated with men, such as aggressive, confident, strong, are incongruent when it comes to a female and normally looked at as negative. So a woman who is aggressive is normally, or assertive, is seen as aggressive, or a woman who is assertive is now seen as a bitch, or difficult, or a diva, or things of that nature. Institutional barriers in particular cause conflict for a woman in leadership because of the way that she is perceived stereotypically. You can't be assertive, but if you're passive, then you're weak. If you're assertive, then you're aggressive and you're dominant. You're too strong. So female leaders have to walk this fine line in appeasing everyone. Well, today we're going to talk about tips to overcome institutional barriers to women in leadership so that you can be more confident and more comfortable walking and standing in your authority. Despite confidence, ambition, determination, and desire, female leaders of color face even greater barriers in leadership. These barriers often come in the form of personal attacks on personality and or character rather than on the issue or problem at hand. We're talking about institutional barriers that women face in leadership. Number one, be objective. Being objective is helpful in two very specific ways. One, it removes the emotion from the situation. Two, it allows for there to be a neutral foundation or starting point for an equitable discussion to take place with everyone now being in a rational state of mind. Be objective by first removing all emotional ties to the situation. Taking out emotion gives you an opportunity to, be logical and to look at just the facts of the situation. Another thing that you can do to be objective is to take a step back, take a deep breath, take a moment to look at the situation from all perspectives and not just your personal bias. And then three, remain neutral. Hear from all sides and be open to all sides. So the first tip is be objective. Two, focus on what's important. Redirect the focus back on the unacceptable behavior, erroneous policy, rule, etc. It's easy for arguments or for debates to take a personal turn when there is no substantive argument, opposition, or reasoning. Focus on what's important by identifying distractions and curtailing interruptions. So another topic may arise that's completely off subject or that is, a little left of what you're talking about. What you need to do is identify that as a distraction. You're getting off task and say, we're going to go back to, this is the problem. This is the, question at hand. How are we addressing it? If there are constant interruptions, you can start by setting expectations for who has the floor and then who will have the floor next, and that there will be no interruptions at that time. Or, however you want to do it. I'm going to explain this first and then I'll take questions after the fact. But you want to put in place parameters so that you won't get distracted and won't get interrupted. 3, establish your credibility. And you do this by being consistent as a leader, by being approachable, by being authentic, by being competent, by being an expert in knowing what you're talking about, having some success stories, having some experience. You bring all that to the table, and that's something that you want to share, how you got to the position you're in and why you're there. Why, if you were sought after, why you were sought after, and what you plan to do in in your capacity. That's how you establish credibility. 4, and I say this all the time, walk in your authority. It took me a number of years to learn to unapologetically walk in my authority. And what that means is, in what capacity did you get there? We talked about establishing credibility in tip number 3. And now we're in tip number 4. So if you were elected, you were elected by the people. That's the authority that you have. And that's who sent you. And that's it. And whose authority you're coming is by the people. If you're appointed, that you were appointed by the board, the commission, the council, whatever governing body appointed you, that's in whose authority you were selected. If you were hired by the hiring manager, department manager, whatever the case may be, who looked at your qualifications and your credentials and said, this is who we want. And this is the candidate that's going to be able to take us from A to B. So that's in whose authority. Walk in that authority. And that's the first part of it. Recognizing that, you didn't fall from the sky. You got here. You were purposely either elected, appointed, or hired. So your role is purposeful. And then the second thing is to understand the responsibilities and the authority that comes with your role. So if you're an elected official, whatever capacity, if you're a mayor, if you're a council person, if you're a county executive, if you're a governor, whatever the case may be, there's the authority that comes with that position. There's authority if you are a director, if you're a supervisor, if you're a manager, there's a certain authority that comes with that position. So learn to walk in your authority. As a young manager, I was sent over to another branch to get them operationally sound. There was an issue with the customer service reps or tellers getting their work turned in at the appropriate time every night, so that the people came in who did their transactions for their, banking business that day, so that it would go be processed that evening. And so this branch was having difficulty. So my regional manager sent me over to that branch and says, you're the manager for the next 2 weeks. I want that branch operationally sound. If it is not, let everybody know that I will close it, fire everybody, and start all over again. I went over to a branch that was not my own, that was not accustomed to my leadership style. And I had to be, assertive. I had to be firm in what our goal was. And I had to aggressively go after the goal in order to maintain their positions. They didn't understand that necessarily at the time. It sounds good. Those are great talking points. But when someone's coming into your territory, telling you how to do your job, and, snatching work out your window, you feel some kind of way about that. And I understood that. But I had to walk in my authority. I was the manager. I had to make sure the work went down, and I had to do it by any means necessary. So if that means you still lollygagging and frolicking and trying to balance, I'm just going to take the work out of where you keep it. I'm going to send it with the courier. And that's what happened. And then I had to understand that with my authority came, if you're insubordinate and you don't want to go along or you don't want to cooperate, that I had the authority to terminate you and find someone else who would be cooperative. So those were things that, I had to establish early on. These are our goals. This is who I was sent by. I've been doing this a long time. My branch hasn't had these issues, whatever, everything else. And I want to work with you. But at the end of the day, we're going to reach this goal. And my 5th and final point today, and these are just tips that have worked for me over the years, both in public and private sector. I'm going to say a phrase I heard a lot of times in ministry: take the meat and throw out the bones. So some of these can work for you and some of them may not, but they have been very helpful for me over the 15 years that I've been in public office and the 20 years that I have been in private sector as a learning and development consultant. The last thing I'll say, and if you've been watching my videos, if you haven't, welcome. Go ahead and click that like button. subscribe so that you won't miss any more new content. You can be a part of our community here. But if you have been with me for a while, you've been watching the videos, you know I'm big, huge on setting expectations. Set expectations for acceptable behavior as a leader on your team. That is paramount, because if there's no expectations, if there's no parameters, then anything goes, right? And that's not right. So set expectations for decorum, professionalism, and acceptable behavior. I know it should go without saying, but unfortunately it does not, because people, in my experience, will try a number of different ways to, I don't know if I want to say thwart your authority or if I want to say undermine your authority, or just disrespect your authority is probably where I'm going to land. And so even something as simple as, I'll give you two examples. One, and both are public sector. One, using my first name. I've had individuals who use my first name as a way to reduce my authority. So even when you call to get your telephone bill, or you're calling about your cell phone or your cable or whatever, they typically ask, can I call you Jennifer? And I typically respond, yes. In these instances, I don't call my chief of police by her first name. I don't call my fire chief by his first name. I don't call my council colleagues by their first name, because we're in a professional setting and you have a title. And so I call you by title. My expectation is when you talk to me, you will do the same, because we're not, in this example, we're not personal friends. Now, some of my colleagues I do have personal relationships with, and outside of the auspice of our roles and conducting business, I do call them by their first name, and vice versa, because that we're speaking personally, we're offline. But in the context of doing our municipal business, you can either refer to me as Council President Earley or Councilwoman Earley, whichever one fits your fancy. But you should not refer to me as Jennifer. And I have had to say that to individuals, and I don't feel bad about doing so, because I work very hard for my elected office, and out of respect, if I'm calling you by your title, if I'm saying clerk such and such or treasurer such and such, I expect for that to be reciprocated. And if you don't understand that, it's up to me to set the expectations so that we're clear about the parameters of our relationship and what type of relationship it is. It's professional, and I'm talking to you from the vantage point of the council president. That's one. The second example I will give you is in 2011, when I was elected council president. I felt the need to take a clause that was normally just stated at council meetings and put it on our council agenda for everyone, the public, elected officials, administrative officials, to understand what their responsibility is as it relates to the decorum that is acceptable while we conduct official business, and the decorum of our council chambers, and the decorum that I expect in our council chambers. Now, prior to 2011, there was the previous council president felt the need to even create it. She created it because of some of the crazy things that were taking place during our council meetings. But in 2011, I wanted to be clear. So it wasn't an unspoken expectation. It's clear on your agenda every time we meet that these are the expectations. If something changes, when we went from in-person to online because of COVID, I restated my expectations every meeting so that everyone is clear on what the expectations are and what the consequences are if those expectations are not followed. So those are your tips. And I say this from a vantage point of, I've talked to a lot of leaders, and I've heard leaders say, in particular, female leaders of color, about some of the things that they experience and how exhausting it is to be in this position and everything you do be questioned or criticized or judged because you are a female leader of color. And so there are many, many, many trainings out regarding diversity and regarding, how to create a culture that's inclusive and building women leaders and all those things. They're all out there. I'm not going to go down that road. This is specifically for a female woman and a female woman of color about how to move forward in your position and how to kind of navigate these waters. You'll come up with your own things as as you've been in leadership. And if you have been in leadership for a long time, please in the comments tell us some tips that you've used over the years to navigate these barriers in leadership that only women or only women of color face. That's the whole point in doing this YouTube channel, is that we can glean from one another's experience and wisdom. But these are just some of the tips that have worked for me, that I have had to kind of settle in and become comfortable with so that I could continue in my capacity. It is exhausting. It does make you question whether or not you want to continue, whether or not it's worth it. I did a video on why I'm in public service and why I'm an elected official and all the things that I've been through. And so this is not an easy walk. So my goal in making this video is to just encourage you. If you're in leadership, keep going, but you set the tone. You are responsible for setting the tone and drawing the line for what you will accept on your team and in communication with you and behavior, all of those things. So, you got this, and everyone else has to know that you got this.